Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video number 274, Talismans, Good Luck Charms, etc. This is something that somehow, and I'm not exactly sure how, I neglected to make a topic on in the Occult series until now. It's actually in part inspired by some of the work I'm compiling now. I'm making another compilational work, which will be ready, I'd say within a week. Tentatively. I'm most of the way done reformatting it. I formatted it wrong at first, so I have to go back through it really quickly, add the bibliography and do the cover art, and then I'm just basically done. Be a full-length work, by the way, about 250 pages when it's complete. And part of it is on talismans. And I was thinking about the general topic of charms, talismans, sort of the folk magic side of things. And it reminds me, sort of, I'll give a few anecdotes of good luck charms that I've used throughout time. I remember back in the 90s, lucky rabbit's feet were a thing. You could literally get them in those little machines. You'd put a quarter in and turn it, and it'd give you a little plastic ball with like a toy or whatever. And some of them had lucky rabbit's feet. Now, I don't like the idea of killing rabbits just for their feet. My assumption and my hope is that it was a byproduct of creating cat food and shit like that. You don't grind up the feet into it, and so you dump the dried feet in some dye, and they came in various colors. The cats loved them as toys. My cat Widget had a green one that he thought was great until he ripped it apart, essentially. Started gnawing on the mummified flesh. Kind of morbid. But it was a thing. I think they've either banned them or they fell out of style. They were very common in the early 90s. I also had a quartz crystal as a kid that I carried around. And at some point I lost it. So it couldn't have been a very good luck charm because, I couldn't even keep it from getting lost. And then I had also a little tiger's eye amulet that I wore when I was younger. And I was thinking another overlap of good luck charms is that when people wear religious iconography, it's basically the same. Like, how Catholics, they'll have that little thing in their car that has, like, what is it, St. Peter? Which one's the patron saint of travelers? Can't remember. St. John, St. Michael, some saint. And you put it in your car. Those were very common back in the 2000s, sort of the religious revivalism of that era, battle cry and shit like that. And Catholics especially are likely to turn to physical talismans of a sort, but even wearing a cross, whether it's a Catholic, like a big-ass golden crucifix, or whether it's something that's more slim than that. It's also common in the Islamic world. As a good luck charm to ward off the evil eye, they have these little amulets. It's like a little eye. And it's strictly sorcery that they're practicing. It's a form of magic. Yet it's common among people that practice religions that in normal terms you would not think of magic as acceptable. And it harkens to, like, my opinion, and I've stated this before, that prayer and incantation are fundamentally the same. A prayer is just a form of spell that happens to be canonically accepted within one's own religion. Essentially, magic tends to be, or the occult, or sorcery, that's the outside stuff, the taboo stuff. That's the unaccepted. The priest doesn't like that. The imam thinks it's bad. The stuff that the priest or the pastor or the imam or the rabbi or whatever accepts is not evil. It's a prayer, or it's an accepted incantation. It's sorcery that you're allowed to do. You're allowed to be a wizard, but only for certain purposes. Sort of like if you look at the burning times among certain Catholic scholars, and certainly the official church canon, certain types of non-Christian magic were tolerated. Maybe not venerated, but tolerated. But only if it was just healing. The Protestants, of course, would say even that was basically through the power of the devil, and they would burn you at the stake for that. The Catholics were vaguely more progressive when it came to the subject of witchcraft at times. Good luck charms, though, are arguably the most common thing as far as the occult goes in the world. That, or I would say, basic zodiac astrology. The basic Western astrology is probably the most common. Good luck charms and talismans a close second. You see this in more dark circles of magic with the idea of a sigil, or a symbol that you're using for invocation or evocation purposes. It's essentially talismanic in form. You would think, I think the best work that's predominantly about talismanic magic would be the Black Pullet. And this is a grimoire, 18th century, I believe French, if I remember correctly. And it talks about a story of a soldier meeting with a Turkish mage at some point and receiving a host of magical talismans with various powers. And it's part grimoire and part story. Interesting work. I've edited a copy of it myself, and I've included the talismanic section in my new compilation, which is sort of why I'm making this video. But the more complex talismans that require prayers or invocations, that require a person to do some sort of ritual to consecrate it, or some sort of special practice to make it work, that's less common. That's sort of fallen out of favor in terms roughly at the end of the 18th century, roughly in the era of the Enlightenment, through the 19th, and especially by the end of the 19th century. The old style of magic had fallen by the wayside, and there was a transition period with works like the Petit Albert, Hohmann's Powwows, Albertus Magnus' Egyptian Secrets, early 1800s, mid-1800s, basically. You get a transitory period where works, before it was very high magic. If you had a physical object for luck or something, it was a talisman, it came associated with a demon, days of the week, a certain incense, and it was very categorical, hierarchical, and complex, and usually it was made of a precious metal or something. Then you get a transitory period where that sort of lore is simplified partially. Usually, at the very least, you no longer need precious metals and alchemy. You know, you might still have an incantation or a prayer or something, or have to consecrate it on a day of the week, but you just have to consecrate it in the light of the moon in a bowl of water. You don't have to sprinkle it with gold dust anymore. And then it's combined with very simple luck rites, very simple talismans, like just saying, well, this herb brings luck to the wearer, so carry a pocket full of posies, basically. Then, at the end of that period, once the transitory period is over, roughly the end of the 19th century, the late 1800s into the modern era, it gets simplified even further. You no longer have Petit Albert, Hohmann, Powwow style bric-a-brac works, except in more rural communities, typically, or in the third world. In the Western world, in the developed world, among urban audiences, and that includes the margins of urban zones, which is basically most of the US, Western Europe, and so forth, you get a hyper-simplification where it's simply, this is a magical magnetic crystal, carry it around with you. There's no prayer, there's no invocation, there's no consecration, there's no special spooky woo rules. It's just, well, you know, it harnesses the Earth's geomagnetic system. It's basically post-rationalism, is what you get. So good luck charms in the 90s are like, you know, quartz crystal, lucky rabbit's foot, something like that. There are things that are in vogue now, certain bracelets, certain charms. In the religious communities, there's almost a revivalism of the consecration methodology in the sense of, like, if you, like, you know, you watch a Trinity Broadcast Network or something, here's the genuine piece of a nail that was in Jesus' hand, and here's a special prayer to go along with it. You say it before you have sex or something to give you good luck genetically. And you have, I know that's hyperbolic, but you get stuff like that. And it's almost a little bit like, if you look at the black magic side of the occult, the modern grimoires, you know, from roughly the internet era's beginning on, there's a revivalism of the old style grimoires, like pre-Enlightenment era, with complex ritualism. And it's the same thing with talismans. It comes with consecration and a perfume and a day of the week and all that stuff, and you have to draw up a star sign to know when to cast this fortunate symbol in bronze under the light of the full moon. You get stuff like that. There's a revivalism, actually, of the old style of magic, which had fallen completely out of favor by the time that the 1800s were over. It's an interesting historical piece, too. It's one part spiritual history and one part literary history, because the works that are actually consulted, if you study centuries and centuries of occult texts, as I have during the editing process, it's fascinating how these things evolve and co-evolve together. As far as good luck charms, do I believe in their effectiveness? Partially. I do not believe that carrying a quartz crystal around will ward off cancer. But I do believe that if you're carrying a good luck charm and you're cognizant of that fact, it can alter one's behavior. This would not be, in a sense, true occultism in a spiritual sense, but it would be pseudo-occult anyway. It's an understanding of human psychology that is spiritual, or spiritually overlapped, rather, in nature. Fascinating subject altogether. That's about all. Peace out.